Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to please grab a seat. My name is Ray Lutz. I am the founder of Citizens Oversight, which has been around since 2006. And also, we started this Earth Summit. I'd like to invite you to return every first Monday or thereabouts of the month. We've had two great sessions so far. The first one about San Onofre and the 3.6 million pounds of high toxic nuclear waste only 100 feet from the water in San Onofre. And the next one was the Tijuana River problem of the waste coming down the Tijuana River and the really bad sewage problem we have that comes out onto our shores. That was the last one, and that was really good with the EPA representative. These are all recorded and online. If you'd like to review them, it's a good thing to watch instead of some Netflix thing. And then today we're having 5G. So I'm not the expert on this. I'm sort of a critical observer, like maybe you are, or maybe some people don't know very much about this. I've read a few things, so I'm just interested as you are. I'd like to introduce Rob Baldwin, who's going to be the MC for the event, and he's going to be taking it from here. Rob, come on up. Give him a hand.
Get the glasses on here. Well, thanks for coming out, you guys. This is an extremely serious topic, and it hasn't been dealt properly with in the media, and so we're going to have a good look at it. Oh, I'm sorry. So let me give you a little overview of what we're going to do. Is this good? Yeah. And what we're going to do is we're going to have 3 speakers tonight, and then it'll be followed by a video by a lady by the name of Dr. Deborah Davis, D-E-V-R-A Davis, and then we'll have a panel and discussion and Q&A. So that'll be kind of the format that we're going to do. And I hope you guys got some munchies back there and enjoyed that. So without further ado, I think we're just going to introduce the first speaker, Dr. Justin Hoffman. And he's a doctor of naturopathic medicine and a doctor of oriental medicine living in San Diego County. He has been doctoring for over 20 years. Before San Diego County, he practiced in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So let's give a warm welcome for Dr. Justin Hoffman.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was kind of an overview of the issues, kind of open up this topic and get people kind of a little bit on the same page. So I gotta be able to see too. So I've been doing environmental medicine training for most of my 20 years in practice, but not the whole time. And issues related to EMF radiation are part of that. It's like the pollution of our air and our water. It's something that has to be known for our good health. And to be honest, I don't want to be here. I'd much rather be doing pottery and relaxing with my family and doing something else. But I try to live by the principle of just listening to my heart and doing what's right. And that's what's brought me here, because this is something we all have to talk about, unfortunately. Like I said, a quick overview with implications for health and safety and privacy and human rights. And this talk could be much longer, so I'll be going quick. In general, this is EMR, electromagnetic radiation. And so you can see up at the upper end, we have X-rays, ionizing radiation. In the middle, we have the color spectrum, the visible light. And then below that, we have all our wonderful toys. We have infrared, microwaves, radio waves, low frequency. And where that big arrow is kind of in the general ballpark of what we're talking about with 5G as it gets up and even closer to the visible spectrum. This is the world we live in now. And we have been led to believe that this is safe and this is normal. But I'm sorry, here comes the red pill. Our current theory, and the theory that all of our standards are based on, is the theory that RF radiation can do no harm at levels below the FCC standards of SARS, which is specific absorption rate. You'll see that on some slides. Basically, the theory goes that if you can't heat the tissue, you can't do any damage. And it's that simple. But that scientific theory has been disproven. There's a huge body of evidence now. However, the marketing campaign to keep you ignorant has been extremely effective. So if you look at those bottom lines that are almost non-existent, those are other countries and their safety standards. And then down very low, China, Russia, Italy, Poland, Paris, India a little bit higher, Israel, and then America and Canada and Australia way, way, way crazy high. And this is the FCC standard. So they based this on, they set it in 1996 based on outdated science at the time. They knew at the time that this was an issue because it only accounts for thermal effects. So even if it was only thermal effects, the model they use, it simulates a 200-pound man on a 30-minute phone call, no longer. And the testing dummy is therefore 97% larger than most of the population. So it only, even following their own standards, it only covers 3% of the population. So even from that, it's kind of ridiculous, but say nothing about children or pregnant women. What we do know from some of the science is that children absorb 10 times more microwave radiation. And this is showing heat from a study done by Dr. Gandhi, and showing the size of the head. So children have thinner skulls, so more radiation gets in, and there's more tissue heating, and there's actually more other damages that don't have anything to do with the tissue heating. These are some modeling based more on physiological models as opposed to just, that other slide is a gel liquid in a model, so nothing anatomically correct about it at all. And what we know now is this, if you look at the little range on the side there, volts per meter squared, based on the science on what's actually healthy and not going to be majorly damaging, it's the black and the dark blue. So the child's ear on the other side may be safe. It just depends. The current science, there are over 10,000 scientific studies that show negative biological effects at non-ionizing levels far below FCC standards. This is a quote. By now, carcinogenicity has been shown in human epidemiological studies and replicated in animal studies. Laboratory studies on RF radiation have shown increase in reactive oxygen species production that can cause DNA strand breaks. In conclusion, RF radiation should be regarded as a human carcinogen group 1 according to the IARC definition, and that is that the agent is carcinogenic to humans. Glioblastoma multiforme is the deadliest type of brain cancer, and it has more than doubled in England since between 1995 and 2015, and almost doubled in Denmark from 2000 to 2019. And every study that I mentioned, even if I don't have time to go over any of that, they're all peer-reviewed, researched, published scientific studies, and they're all available. They're all freely available. The US CDC presents new findings in 2018 of increasing brain cancer, renal, hepatic, and thyroid cancers among individuals under 20 years old in the US. This data covers 48 states and 98% of the human population. Fertility and reproduction. Consistent evidence from experimental research and epidemiological studies and animal studies show that RF exposure is associated with reduced sperm count, motility, and concentration, as well as DNA damage. And according to the FCC's own words, the observation of biological effect in and of itself does not necessarily suggest the existence of biological hazard. A biological effect only becomes a safety hazard when it causes detectable impairment of the health of the individual or of his or her offspring. So according to the mountains of peer-reviewed research that we now have and the FCC's own words, we can now say definitively that cell phone radiation is a safety hazard. This is a chart showing the levels of allowable radiation, and our guidelines are up on the far right. And as we go further to the left, we see that smart meters, their radiation is set to that standard. And if you look over at the 100, which is Russia and Chinese health standards, and then over a little further, cordless phones, and the studies there show disruption of cardiac function. And then on the 5, laptop Wi-Fi damages sperm motility and DNA. And Wi-Fi exposure alters brain function. And this tiny little one down there, 0.5 microwatts per meter squared. Cell tower headaches, disrupted sleep, and tremors. And my wife will be going over a lot more of the studies on the health effects. So I guess it depends on who you ask whether something is safe or not. Just as a quick question, how many people have a cell phone on them right now?
On me?
And how many people have it on, transmitting, and not on airplane mode? Not on airplane mode, actually on and transmitting right now. Good. And you should have it on airplane mode and all the antennas turned off, Wi-Fi off, Bluetooth off, unless you're using it for that. So the industry studies show harmful effect only 32% of the time, when non-industry studies show harmful effect 70% of the time. So I guess it does matter who you ask. This is a compilation of about 1,800 studies, which they used to form the Bioinitiative report for 2012 report that was done with 10 countries and about 30 doctors, different researchers. And what you can see from this chart is the blue line at the top is our FCC standard, maximum permitted frequency, and that's a cumulative amount. And every dot on this chart is a study, a published peer-reviewed study, and on the bottom there's the name of the principal investigator and also the year that it was published. And the little numbers and letters that go up that are labels to say what kind of damage was done and what was affected, what was shown to be causative by cell phone radiation. And so if you look at the little tiny things, brain cancer, other cancer, heart, metabolism, oxidation, DNA damage, reproduction, sleep, stress, or immune function. So every single one of these, all the way down to the very bottom, and the very bottom one says OD, which stands for DNA damage. So even the very, very lowest one has been shown to cause DNA damage. EMF studies far below FCC limits have found plants, reduced growth, increased infection. Birds showing aggressive behavior, impaired reproduction, and interference with migration. Livestock has shown reduced productivity, impairment of reproduction, and sudden death. Rodents, increased cancer. Amphibians and insects, deformities, and population decline. Anyone else notice like how many there's just no insects anymore? No, most places. Honeybees, aggressive behavior, reduced productivity, swarming, and abandoning hives. So when you use your phone right next to your body, it radiates like a sun, like a bare light bulb in all directions. So as you hold it right to your head, half of that's going right into your head. And as is in the iPhone there, it says carry the iPhone at least 10 millimeters away from your body. That is written into the user's manual, the legal manual that's inside your phone. Did you know, according to FCC recommendations, you should not use a phone while against your body. Carry iPhone at least 5 millimeters away from your body to ensure exposure levels remain at or below tested levels. And that blue line, that crazy blue line that's way, way high that everyone at the brain says is probably the blue line. It didn't, oh great. The very, very top, the tallest line you can see on any chart, that's what this, whenever you hold the phone directly to your head, you're going above that line. Every phone on the market hides this consumer safety warning in the fine print of all user manuals, no matter where nobody's likely to see it. And this is one person, but there's lots of other studies. This was a woman who had no genetic predisposition, no risk factors, but unusual tumors. 5 different cancers, all located directly below where her cell phone was in her bra for a decade. So this is the Sar Chart. This is a test that was done by the French National Testing Agency, testing to see whether cell phones were safe. And they found that 9 out of 10 tested exceeded limits when they tested next to the body. And so that top one is the 10 millimeter. If you hold it more than 10 millimeters away for an iPhone 5, it's that lower level, which it meets their safety standard. But you can see when it's directly according to touching the skin, it's much, 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 much higher. Same chart showing our Wi-Fi, it's the same magnetic frequency radiation levels. USA is at 1,000, Australia is at 200, yada yada. The world is trying to stop this. Countries and governments around the world are trying to work on this. France banned Wi-Fi for kindergarten. Belgium banned cell phones for children. Israel removed Wi-Fi from schools in the city of Haifa. So other governments are trying to make a difference on this. This is not the best slide, but what I wanted you to get from this is that this is 3 generations. So in 2 generations. So the top person, the top child, is being irradiated, basically from the time that she's growing up. And it says, just in 2 generations, we could have more dead and sick infants that resulted from both world wars. University researchers and government scientists and international scientific advisors say a minimum of 57% of schoolgirls exposed to low-level microwave radiation are at risk of suffering stillbirth, fetal abnormalities, and genetic damage children when they give birth. And then as you're seeing at the bottom, this is those kids growing up and having kids themselves. We're talking about severely epidemic of problems. There is now much more evidence of risks to health affecting billions of people worldwide. The status quo is not acceptable in light of the evidence of harm. And this is just our current RF radiation exposures that are destroying our health and the health of multiple life systems of our planet. So this is a massive breach of trust. And why don't we know about it? Why aren't we hearing about this every day? The FCC is wholly owned by the telecom industry, and this book, Captured Agency, is free online. Anybody can find it and download it. It describes basically what we know about who did what and when. The US Department of Defense shows that they knew in the 50s that EMF radiation caused harm, and that's why they defunded the EPA in the early 90s instead of implementing those safety standards that they tried to implement back then, that they had developed. The Wall Street Journal from 2014, 1 in 10 cell towers violates the RF radiation rules. So going above our own safety standards, not safe. A handful of companies, large banks, and financial indexing firms own all the major players that drive the world economy. And these 6 media companies control what we read, watch, and listen to. That used to be in 50 companies in 1983, and that's now down to 6. And this says, relax. Your friendly media conglomerate will decide what you need to know. And we all know smoking doesn't cause cancer, right? I mean, where's the evidence, right? Well, we know now, after a decade or a generation of lies. And this quote comes from a tobacco executive: doubt is our product, since it is the best means of competing with the body of fact that exists in the minds of the general public. It is also the means of establishing a controversy. And this applies to fracking, this applies to fossil fuels, this applies to lots of the ills that are happening in our world. But business is good, and nobody's allowed to go against the interests of the advisors. Advertisers. What did I say? Everything is fine. We now return you to your regularly scheduled programming. And the industry claims of 5G safety are fraudulent. There has never been a safety study for 5G. They studied, recently, just last month, the FCC came out with, after studying it for 6 years, they decided not to revise their current safety limits, and is based only on thermal effects. And in a recent Senate testimony, the telecom executives admitted that they have done no safety studies and are not planning, and know of no one that is planning any safety studies. And this map is Balboa Park, and all the green dots and red dots and yellow dots are where the 5G cell towers are going to be. It will be a blanket every day, all day, no matter where you go, in every city, everywhere. Our current form of capitalism has no concept of right or wrong. It only recognizes what is profitable and what you can get away with. And when you have the government, the media, the military, and the police on your payroll, you can get away with pretty much anything. This used to be a rainforest. This used to be a thriving ecosystem. We are currently seeing the next major, global extinction. Refugee crisis, prisons, pollution on every front. The garbage patch, as we call it, is now twice the size of Texas. All of these disasters are linked to science showing that we have an effect, that our choices make an effect, and we're making it worse. Coastal erosion, seawater rise, homelessness, private prisons. How close do the problems have to be before you can ignore them? And this 5G transmitter is on 24/7, right outside the window of this poor little 3-year-old girl. But we're going to all have one soon. This is a violation of our core human rights. My rights and the basic human rights of every citizen are being violated in this attempt to implement this untested technology on the population. Our own California Constitution says we people are by nature free and independent and having inalienable rights to defend liberty and life, safety, happiness, and privacy. Universal exposure of radiation from wireless devices violates the Nuremberg Code of Ethics. The secret of freedom lies in educating people, whereas the secret of tyranny is in keeping them ignorant. We are being denied the truth and manufactured doubt, media silence, and government corruption. 5G is untested on humans, untested on trees, insect, bees, livestock, untested. The rabbit hole on RF radiation goes much, much, much deeper. Don't just believe us. Don't believe me. Go do your own research. The scientists are trying to warn us. And I'm sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is scary. You should be afraid. The science is terrifying, and ignorance will not save you. This is a wake-up call for our generation. Thank you for being here, every one of you, because I really appreciate we're all in this together. Nobody can save us. If we want a world for our kids and our grandkids, we must rescue ourselves. This is only allowed by our continued ignorance and apathy. But don't lose hope. Citizens the world over are joining together to fight this. And we are not advocating for no technology, but the safe application of technology. There are safe alternatives. Remember who you love and what are you willing to do for them. And remember that those that don't know yet just don't know yet. Be patient and calm and point them to the research. So with corruption at every level, what to do? Take a picture of this slide. Call your senators, your congressman, your governor, your mayor, and don't stop calling them. We must demand action to protect our health and our world. We must demand an end to the Citizens United and to legalize corruption. Join Stop 5G Encinitas, join Extinction Rebellion, join Wolfpack to end our corrupt political system. Educate yourself and protect your family. Find independent news sources. Take a picture of this one. And most importantly, read the science. Read it for yourself. It's not hard. It's very easy to find. Environmental Health Trust /science, it's there. There's so much you can see. Physicians for Safe Technology, Scientists for Wired Technology. There are so many good resources that you can look and read it for yourself. And I implore you, please do. We are all in this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hoffman. And our next speaker will be Dr. C. And I'll read her bio right now. Excuse me. Dr. Deborah C. graduated magna cum laude at Duke University, received her master's degree in public administration from Rutgers University, and high honors and doctorate from Southwest College in naturopathic medicine. She's done medical research at Mount Sinai Medical Center and the Bronx VA Hospital. She has been a strategic planner for major hospital systems prior to becoming a doctor. She has been in the healthcare field for some 37 years. Please welcome Dr. C.
Hello. Thank you all for being here. It's really, my husband and I both are like, we want to spread the word. And so the more people that hear and understand and do their research, the better. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being part. As a strategic planner, it was important to look at what was going on and what was coming and preparing for them proactively. As a naturopathic doctor, I was taught to look for the root cause of illness and to prevent disease first. Often that root cause of illness was an environmental condition, like mold or electromagnetic radiation. After researching issues regarding 5G and seeing patients who are crippled both physically and mentally by EMR exposure, I've been standing up and speaking up to help prevent a global catastrophe. As a strategic planner, doctor, mother, and a resident of San Diego County, I am extremely concerned about the lack of information decision makers are given and then the resultant decisions that will harm many people. Caring for humanity, and as part of my life mission, I'm here to raise people's awareness and consciousness to see the truth. Tonight, I would like to share what I've learned about the medical issues of electromagnetic radiation and the potential health issues from the rollout of 5G. These are some of the symptoms and health effects of EMR exposure. Many people in cities that have already rolled out 5G are experiencing these symptoms, sometimes immediately. Sleep disturbances, insomnia, headaches, eye pain, rapid or irregular heart rate, depression, chronic deep fatigue, dysesthesia, lack of concentration, brain fog, feeling zoned out, changes in memory, even severe memory impairment, dizziness, irritability, increased stress response, loss of appetite and weight loss, restlessness and anxiety, nausea and vomiting, intense ringing in the ears, hearing loss, skin burning and tingling, rashes, nosebleeds, chest pains, flu-like symptoms, short stabbing pains around the body, buzzing of internal organs, seizures, swelling inside nasal passages, infertility, behavioral problems like hyperactivity and avoidance, feeling of loss of well-being, even doom, and erratic blood sugar levels. These highlighted medical issues will be exponentially increased once 5G is implemented. Current research looking at electromagnetic radiation exposure has made direct links to cancer, brain cancer, skin, breast, testicular, salivary, and leukemia. There has been an increase in pediatric and young adult cancer cases associated with electromagnetic radiation. Research has shown a link to decreased survival rates in kids who have been exposed to 10 years of radiation or more for only half an hour a day. And you know our kids are doing it more than half an hour a day. We need to wake up. Silicon Valley parents are fighting against 5G in their cities, and many putting their kids in Waldorf schools so they are not exposed to the radiation. Even 4G is unsafe as these studies show. Why is this going in now? Sorry. No one should be giving kids cell phones to play or to entertain them with. Children are much more vulnerable as their brains are developing and their skulls are much thinner. Voltage-gated calcium channels, excuse me, is there technical difficulties? Okay, I'll try. Thank you. Voltage-gated calcium channels are in our cell membranes and play a critical role in all cellular functions. In 2013, Martin Pall published his findings that EMF opens up these channels. This is serious. We are talking about what regulates our heart rate, what releases neurotransmitters and creates muscle contractions. Irregular heart rates can lead to stroke and heart attacks. These are studies showing that EMR leads to a leaky blood-brain barrier, decreased blood to the brain, and increased plaque formation. This will lead to many people becoming cognitively impaired, like Alzheimer's and other neurological diseases. There will also be even more of an increase in autoimmune conditions, mold toxicity, infertility, uncontrolled diabetes, autism, insomnia, cataracts, blindness, hearing loss, and worsening of infectious diseases. Oops, I think I'm on the wrong side. Okay. Think of it this way. EMR can make things irritable. It is a noxious stimuli, especially the pulsed waves that are constantly, irregularly pulsing at us at very, very, very high frequencies. Our cells and our pathogens, the bacteria, viruses, and other organisms that cause diseases, become irritable and angry. There are consequences for this unnatural assault to our bodies. Dr. Klinghardt, a world-renowned physician, states this: I personally suspect that the exposure to electromagnetic fields in the home and the microwaves from all cell phone radiation are driving the virulence of many of the microbes that are naturally in us and makes them aggressive and illness-producing. Shielding patients from EMFs has been a more successful strategy for treating Lyme disease and to get people neurologically well than any of the antibiotics or any of the antimicrobial compounds. He is finding this now. What will happen once 5G is everywhere and we cannot shield ourselves from it? This chart from an epidemiological study shows the frequency of people experiencing symptoms in relationship to distance from a cell tower. The list on the left ranks orders the symptoms by frequency. So you can see fatigue is one of the top ones. This clearly shows it is not just people who are electromagnetically sensitive that are having an effect. At less than 10 meters, 70% of people experience fatigue very often. And even at greater than 300 meters, people experience symptoms. If you don't have sleep, you cannot recover. So you might ask, what about the cities where 5G is rolled out already? In Vienna, Claire Edwards, a UN staff member, stated within 5 weeks of 5G rollout that friends and acquaintances and their children in Vienna are already reporting the classic symptoms of EMR poisoning: nosebleeds, headaches, eye pains, chest pains, nausea, fatigue, vomiting, tinnitus, dizziness, flu-like symptoms, and cardiac pain. They also report a tight band around the head, pressure on top of the head, short stabbing pains around the body, and buzzing internal organs. Other biological effects, such as tumors and dementia, usually take longer to manifest, but in the case of 5G, which has never been tested for health or safety, who knows? Seemingly overnight, a forest of 5G infrastructure has sprouted in Austria. In the space of 3 weeks, one friend has gone from robust health to fleeing this country, where she has lived for 30 years. Each person experiences electromagnetic radiation differently. For her, it was extreme torture, so she and I spent her two last nights in Austria sleeping in the woods. This will be much more common. In Switzerland, it was reported as soon as antennas were installed, several residents and entire families in the heart of Geneva reported similar unusual symptoms of loud ringing in the ear, intense headaches, unbearable earaches, insomnia, chest pain, fatigue, and not feeling well in the house. 29-year-old Geneva resident John Pouchard called up Swisscom and was told that indeed the 5G cell towers were activated on the same day he began to feel his symptoms. When others called Swisscom, they were told everything is legal and within guidelines. The Swiss Dr. Bertrand Busch, a Swiss physician, denounced 5G and also called for a moratorium. He has seen more and more patients with similar symptoms. He notes, in this case, our authorities are going against common sense. We risk experiencing a catastrophe in a few years. No serious study exists yet, which is not surprising when we know that this technology was developed in China and then to the United States. In Switzerland, we could open a line for people who feel bad, listen to their complaints, and examine them. Our country has the means and the skills. The debate must be launched because the story is not about to end. Here in California, Sacramento, I spoke to a resident, they were one of the first cities to roll out 5G. I spoke to a resident in Sacramento who told me that people are experiencing symptoms from 5G and that they are trying to educate others to stop 5G. Families have experienced their kids getting cold and flu-like symptoms right after the deployment. There were two little girls whose bedroom was 30 feet away from a 5G antenna, and they had to move their rooms and shield their house to partially mitigate it. They were sick for 2 months before they realized that it was a small cell antenna. Once they moved rooms and shielded the house, their symptoms improved, but the family is extremely anxious about the other effects this may cause. Family and friends visiting have been getting headaches and feeling ill. People are living in fear. Kids cannot go outside and play without the risk of radiation exposure, because 5G is everywhere. On a personal note, a very close friend of mine, who I spoke to last week, who's a doctor in Maui, noticed that in the last few months, she has seen many patients who are healthy, vibrant, 30-some-year-old women and getting severe autoimmune disease. They had markers for Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, and other autoimmune disease. She herself just found out she had a breast lump and also an autoimmune disorder after having a clean thermography in January. Prior to this finding, she became extremely lethargic and filled with doom. She felt like it was not safe, and she's very intuitive. She noticed other people complaining about extreme fatigue as well, who were all vivacious people. On August 30th, there were 6 beached whales on Maui. Only one survived. Larry Ellison, a tech millionaire who owns Lanai, had been flying a drone the length of a football field with filled with 5G antennas, like maybe, I think it was like 13,000, something crazy like that, around the island of Maui, testing it. Ironically, he is also planning a mysterious wellness company in partnership with a cancer doctor and will charge $5,000 a day. Wake up, people, please. Let us dream a different dream where we and our government in the United States of America care about each other and have concerns about the earth and its people. The cities of Brussels and Geneva have blocked trials and banned upgrades to 5G out of concern about health risks. The Environment Minister of Brussels, Céline Froment, stated, "I cannot welcome such technology if the radiation standards, which must protect the citizens, are not respected, 5G or not. The people of Brussels are not guinea pigs whose health I can sell at a profit. We cannot leave anything to doubt." I love that quote.
Yeah, that's good.
Canton of Vaud in Switzerland also called for a moratorium. Russia's Minister of Defense has blocked use of 5G frequencies. Prime Minister of Poland signs global appeal to stop 5G. Netherlands Parliament asks for an independent investigation on 5G health risks. Even Rome has created a resolution asking the mayor to stop the 5G trial and not to raise the limit values in the threshold of electromagnetic radiation, avoiding the positioning of millimeter microwave antennas on homes, schools, daycare centers, recreation centers, street lamps, and more. He stated, "I am in favor of technological progress, but not on the experimentation of 5G technology in the absence of scientific data on the repercussions for health." This slide should hit home how serious this could be. This is a small pilot study by Susan Foster, study showing actual damage to humans from cell towers. They used SPECT brain scans on California firefighters living and working with a cell tower adjacent to their station. And after 5 years of exposure, they found brain abnormalities in all firefighters tested. Firefighters got lost on 911 calls in the town they grew up in on several occasions. In one instance, 4 firefighters sat in the rig in a stupor with the alarm sounding in the background, unable to remember how to start the engine. A medic with 20 years of experience who had never made a mistake forgot basic CPR in the midst of resuscitating a coronary victim. The brain scans of these 6 men revealed a pervasive hyperexcitability of the neurons, which suggests the exposure of RF microwave radiation was causing the neurons to continuously fire without benefit of rest. When neurons or brain cells cannot rest, they ultimately die. The study found brain abnormalities in all the men tested, delayed reaction time, lack of impulse control, and cognitive impairment. All the firefighters tested had suffered from sleep disturbance, headaches, lack of focus, and memory loss. Think about that. And also know that this study, when they measured the cell tower, it was 1/1000th below the FCC standard guidelines. So very low. Why has the FCC tied our hands and say that we cannot object to cell antennas based on health reasons? And why have there been no safety studies done on the biological effects of 5G before this mass rollout? And why are they pushing so hard on rolling this out, forcing towns to make a plan without any time to get people informed? Why do the towns of Silicon Valley oppose 5G and send their kids to Waldorf schools where there is no technology? Why did the former chairman and co-founder of Qualcomm line this house with copper shielding. Do they know something we don't? Why are we the guinea pigs? Looking at what we know now about EMR currently and the exponential properties of 5G, we need to prepare for a public safety crisis. We will have first responders that will be incapacitated, surgeons, doctors, nurses, incapacitated, people working on power lines or hazardous jobs, incapacitated, increase in accidents resulting from cognitive impairment and exhaustion from insomnia, increased 911 calls of strokes, heart attacks, tachycardia, bleeding eyes, ears, etc., food scarcity from lack of pollinators, and many more things we cannot even imagine. Are cities preparing for any of these as they push this through? It is not so far-fetched as our firefighters know. We will also have a public health crisis. People will become extremely sick with no recourse. They cannot escape the radiation. We will have an increase in people who are incapacitated and living with extreme pain and anxiety. People who have metal in their bodies from dentistry, hip and knee replacements, spinal rods, etc., will be antennas to EMR. There will be epidemics of blindness, kidney failure, neurodegeneration, cardiovascular disease, cancer, autoimmune disease, autism, infertility, and much more. With the inability to address the cause, they will be unable to get better. There will be no place to live. Homelessness will increase. Everyone, including children, will be aging and dying much faster. The more time people are exposed to EMR, the more people will become hypersensitive to it. People will be exposed 24/7. And I'm sorry, this is pretty depressing. You all look like you're like, I'm sorry. Anyway, now you know why we're here. This is why I'm here. Not only will 5G affect humans, it will also create an environmental crisis. The radiation affects migratory sensors. It will kill our pollinators as well as the birds, whales, and many other animals. EMR affects plants and trees. This will ultimately lead to increasing global warming. All living things will be affected by this blanket of radiation. We will be a mass of crippled people with major disabilities and illness, just like the firemen study. We will be lost. Cancer will rise drastically, people will be infertile, and eventually there will be a mass extinction. For those of you who are concerned about money, I put up this slide. Property values will plummet. No one wants to buy a house with a cell antenna nearby. Why not? Because we know about the health effects. What can we do? Get educated and spread the word. Everyone needs to know. The FCC is trying to surpass the local governments now by allowing antennas to be put on private property. We need to tell everyone, whether they live in an apartment, condo, own a home, or live in a facility, about the dangers. ehtrust.org is a great website to start in your education. Join us at stop5gencinitas.com and support your local groups. Communities need to join together and unite. Buy an RF meter and start measuring. Don't fall for the industry's propaganda that 5G is safe. There are no safety studies. We need to stand up and have our voices heard to ensure the safety of our citizens and the world, that they are the priority. Wired technology is faster, safer, and less costly. Out of love for our fellow humans, love for our planet, and the creatures that reside here, we must dream a different dream. Collectively, we must stand up and say no to this, and yes to safe technology. Thank you.
Rob's not here to introduce, so please introduce yourself, sir.
I'll do that. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for coming. My name is Dr. Stephen Vogue. I'm a doctor of chiropractic and a naturopath. And I've been in practice for over 40 years now, so that kind of dates me, doesn't it? So I'm one of those who are providing some information on 5G health hazards. And we'll start off with some of the things that the other speakers have talked about. The FCC is not protecting you. It's not protecting the public. A lot of the studies that have been done are by industry standards. And again, here, of 183 members who have served on the council, Since March of 2011, 124 members, over 67%, represented industry. So the revolving door between industry executives and the FCC. They can't be trusted. And they're aware of the harm. The electromagnetic radiation safety people provided an index of key submissions as testimony to the FCC regarding RF exposure, that's radio frequency, and its health effects. They got 1,200 submissions between June 25th of 2012 and October 1st of 2019. That's like recently. And many of these submissions include multiple documents, of which I have research. By the way, I just want to interject and say that if you folks signed the roster outside and have a legible email address, I'll send you a lot of the references that'll get your eyes wide open. Some really fascinating stuff out there. So the preponderance of submissions call on the FCC to adopt stronger exposure limits on radio frequency radiation. So they've had years of corruption under their belt. Like I said before, the revolving door of telecom corporation lobbyists gained positions with the FCC and vice versa. This was mentioned by the other speakers. A Harvard publication exposed how industry captured the FCC in a book entitled Captured Agency. And I'll send you references to that again if you signed in, by Norm Alster. So again, the government doesn't really care about you. And it's only 59 pages. It's an easy read, and it'll demonstrate without a doubt that the government really doesn't care about you. And it's why, in spite of the evidence of the harmful effects of 5G, we are quite literally fighting for our lives. Yes, fighting for our lives. According to the scientific research, the rollout of 5G will have far worse health consequences than 4G. Dr. Martin Paul is a PhD, and he's a professor of emeritus of biochemistry and genetics with a BA in physics. And I'll be borrowing a lot for him. According to Paul, in an interview on the 5gsummit.com, and I highly advise, if you're not familiar with the 5gsummit.com, check it out. You can get a DVD of all of the lectures with, I think, some 20...
It's free again right now.
It's free again right now? Yeah, you can see it for a short time. So he says, Paul says, this guy with the great credentials, 5G will be an extinction event. And you can see from what the other speakers were saying why it could be. He says putting tens of millions of 5G antenna without a single biological test of safety has got to be about the stupidest idea anyone's ever had in the history of the world. So now that I've set a delightful mood, let's understand why it's hazardous to our health and what those hazards are. Firstly, 5G on its own has only had like maybe one or two studies. They haven't studied it. They don't want to, really. And the reason that the scientists are in an uproar about 5G is that the studies on 4G accurately predict from both biochemistry and physics that 5G will be a disaster. Here's why. 5G is predicted to be particularly dangerous for each of four different reasons. I interject. A lot of the stuff that you saw from the previous speakers and a lot of what I've got relates to 4G damage, not 5G. The scientists are predicting things ahead with 5G because they see the parameters of 5G can be much more deadly. And here's why. The extraordinary high numbers of antenna that are planned. They're everywhere. They're going to be ubiquitous. They're going to be just all over our environment. You can't get away from it. Two, the very high energy outputs, which will be used to ensure penetration. They want to penetrate you quite well. And the extraordinarily high pulsation levels. It's at extremely high frequency compared to 4G, And the modulation of the wave is much more significant as well. Many, many more pulses. And this is what affects the DNA so badly. And then the apparent high level of interactions of 5G frequency on charged groups, presumably including the voltage sensor charged groups. And we'll be talking about that in a moment. And also, because pulsed EMFs, that's electromagnetic frequencies, are in most cases much more biologically active than non-pulsed EMFs, and 5G is vastly more pulsed than 4G transmissions, and current safety guidelines allow us to be exposed to EMF levels that are something like 7.2 million times too high. Higher than what? 7.2 million times higher than required to trigger voltage-gated calcium channels, which is something we're going to get into. This will be describing why 5G is going to be so dangerous to us. So the known adverse health effects are that single-strand and double-strand breaks in cellular DNA and oxidized bases in cellular DNA, which have roles in cancer causation and in producing the most important mutational changes. Cancer causation, in Dr. Paul's work, which, like I say, I have referenced for you if you want it, 35 different reviews on it. The science is replete with information. Brain cancer, salivary cancer, acoustic neuromas, that's from holding up to the ear, and other types of cancer go with cell phone use. And people living near the cell phone towers have increased cancer rates. So we've got lowered male and female fertility. It's going to be highly increased. It has increased spontaneous abortion, lowered levels of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, lowered libido. 18 reviews on that. And here's the real killer. A study on mouse reproduction showed EMF exposure at doses well within our current safety guidelines produced complete sterility that was found to be largely irreversible. This is certainly one basis for Paul's claim that 5G is an extinction event. So Dr. Paul says, I expect we'll see a crash in human reproduction to almost zero, as happened in the Madras and Xenos mouse study, which I estimate to occur in about 5 years, without any increases in our exposures. Do you see why we all have to be activists now? We really have to do something. I'm active with, and the number of people here are active in the Encinitas City Council. If any of you are from different towns, start getting in touch with the council members, because there's a way to stop this, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. So another health effect is the neurological and neuropsychiatric effects. They cause sleep disturbances, insomnia, fatigue, tiredness. Everybody's mentioned this before: depression, lack of concentration, dizziness, vertigo, memory changes, irritability. Know of anybody who's got any of these already? And there's a lot of chemical causes out there too, but this is demonstrated to be the case. So we're under attack. Attacks on our nervous system, including our brains, with widespread neuropsychiatric effects, including early onset dementia and Alzheimer's. Dr. Paul thinks that it's going to dumb down society so much that, well, you remember the firefighter example that was talked about earlier. People can't function anymore. Exposures in utero can cause ADHD and autism. And then there's the attacks on our endocrine or hormonal systems. So attacks on the DNA of our cells producing cancer and mutations in germline cells, which produce mutations in future generations. We've got attacks on the reproductive system, attacks on the cardiovascular system with life-threatening cardiac effects. You see, these voltage-gated calcium channels that we're going to get into are more highly concentrated in the nervous system, in the dendrites, neurons, and in heart muscles, anywhere there's smooth muscle. So this is why these effects are going to be noted first. So we've got attacks in the cardiovascular system with demonstrable cardiac effects, life-threatening. And the oxidative stress and free radical damage has been shown to cause so many different diseases that they're too numerous to mention. I don't know if I've got it in here or not. Because of the causing of dementia and so on. In Russia, Vladimir Putin is reported to have said, and I may have it in here, but this is a point to put it in, that we don't have to go to a war with America. He said, we just wait until everybody's in a psychiatric hospital. Yeah. And so he's not really into this. So what's a VGCC? It's a voltage-gated calcium channel. It's something you're going to have to learn a lot more about. They're little pores on the membrane of your cells. And it just happens that they act to signal cells into activity. So the EMF at these frequencies overstimulate them. So they exist in the cells that contain the nucleus and organelles and are enclosed by a plasma membrane. And like I say, they're the highest in endocrine cells and in muscle cells and neurons. Now normally you get a lot more calcium on the outside of the cell than you do on the inside. But when these calcium channels are activated by the voltage is set up, and remember we talked about 7.2 million times higher? I mean, that's horrendous. It results in a cascade of calcium ions into the cell, and it results in cellular dysfunction. That's the medium through which most of these effects take place. And so it causes a diversity of different pathophysiological effects. And these effects occur at low field densities. Can you imagine what's going to happen when these antennas are everywhere? However, both biological studies and physics describe how profoundly hazardous EMF signals can be, in that current safety guidelines allow us to be exposed to EMF levels that are something like 7.2 million times too high. It's pretty wild. This is just a chart that describes how the microwave frequencies cause the VGCC activation, causes that cascade of calcium into the cells, which then take a couple of pathways. One of them is to produce superoxides, and this peroxynitrite is a particularly powerful oxidizer of our cells. So this explains why when the previous speakers were talking about how as soon as they put up the towers and turned them on, people started experiencing stuff almost immediately. And that's because they get these profound changes in their physiology. Okay. See, I'm going to be much faster than the other folks. I'm just here to scare you. What's the legal option? What can we do about this? So this will be new for you. There is an attorney who comes out of Tasmania. He's Australia. Tasmania is a little island off of Australia. And he effectively has helped many towns, including many in the United States, block the installation of 5G antennas, including stopping those that have already been erected. And he shares his legal process openly, and all of his paperwork is available. So this is why. How many here are electrosensitive and know it? I'm really curious. Yeah, I thought we might even have more. This is why I would love to send you the research, and there will be a link to Attorney Broomhall's information. His complete legal information on how to go about it. What it requires is a complainant, like you, particularly if you're electrosensitive. That's why I asked. So if you're electrosensitive, then you get a hold of an attorney, you get a hold of a medical doctor, and from there, you can use his legal process to literally block the 5G, and he's done it in many different places. And so far, it seemed pretty foolproof. He hasn't declared that there's been a failure yet. Because, like the previous speakers talked about the Nuremberg trials, you can't do this to people. It's like, if this comes in, it's like shooting invisible bullets at us. We are definitely under attack. So,
has there been success in the United States?
He has had success in some cities in the U.S. That's right. You can see him speaking in 2 different sections on the 5G summit, and I also, like I said, have stuff that I'm happy to send to you with your email. So that ends it for my discussion with it. Thank you very much.
Maybe I can help a little bit with the very basic information that they didn't touch on yet. Okay, so your cell phone puts out radio frequency and it communicates with these towers around. These days, it's usually around, some of them are 700 megahertz, some are 2.4 gigahertz. 2.4 gigahertz is usually the frequency that they use for Wi-Fi too. And these, it turns out, were some of the most active, biologically active frequencies that they happen to be using now. And they did the testing. There was that 10-year study, the rat study, that just came out recently, they were going to do this. They spent millions of dollars. They spent 10 years. The industry said, we're going to prove that we're safe. And they set it up with the conditions that were supposedly going to show that everything was safe, and it came out a disaster for them. The rats did get cancer, and especially the male rats. And that's what the stuff we have now. Now, I still have a question. I'm an engineer. I'm an electronics engineer, so I know a lot about radio frequencies and vibrations. I know that the stuff we have now is pretty bad. And I don't know if the new stuff is worse or better. I just don't know. Maybe because they're more antennas and they're lower intensity, maybe it would be better than what we have now. Even though if you emitted at the same level as what they have now, it would probably be pretty bad. If you live next to one of those cell towers, they're putting them everywhere now. I see them up in church, steeples. They put up where all the people are all the time. You get hit with those RF frequencies. Now, I have some questions. They talk about pulsed. I know that the smart meters had pulses that went out, just very briefly, but very intensively. And the people that had those smart meters next to their bedrooms were having these effects. Now, the new 5G stuff is supposed to be up at around not 2.4 gigahertz, but around 28 gigahertz, much higher. And it's like they call it millimeter waves. When you go to the airport and you stand in the thing like this, you're being shot with millimeter wave radiation. It goes through your body and they can see everything. And in fact, they can see so well that they had to, obliterate certain things, or it was going to be quite intrusive. Well, those frequencies don't penetrate buildings and stuff as well. And so for that reason, they want to put them everywhere. They want to put them on just about every, telephone pole, every light fixture around, out on the street. They're going to have them everywhere. Instead of a tower here and there, like 1 kilometer away, they would be, as you saw on the chart earlier, all those dots that were everywhere.
Is that current or is that proposed?
That's proposed. And now you have this mad rush for the telephone companies, like Verizon, like Sprint, and guess who we pay for our cell phone? They have us all on the hook for hundreds of dollars a month to pay their stupid bills. Well, they want to continue that. They want to make sure that we're all continuing to pay them. So it's a hard question because how many people want to give up their cell phone and the wireless technology? Very, very few people.
Get a bag, don't wear it on your, don't put it in your
Don't
pocket.
definitely don't always spend your time with your phone up to your head. This has to be the worst idea ever.
And don't put it in your bra.
Don't put it in your bra. I don't do that, by the way. I stopped doing that a long time ago.
Is Wi-Fi as bad or worse than having?
Some people say that Wi-Fi is worse, even though you would think that it would be.
24 hours, you're stuck.
At your house, I recommend that you go to wired internet. It's faster anyway. Yeah, it's a pain to kind of string the wires around, but honestly, it's faster. So in my house, I try to avoid, even though people come over and you almost have to have the wireless for them to connect. They expect it now. Yes, Veronica?
Can we go down to like 2G on cell phones and can we live with that safely, or is that not possible?
Okay.
Like,
Lit.
like the cell phone used to be 2G, 3G, 4G, now 5G.
Yeah, they want to
Can we
go.
go back? Can we do safely 2G or 3G?
Well, the 3G is what they tested with the rats. Okay, and the 3G was maybe even worse. But as I was saying, one thing in my mind, because as an engineer, I know how they send these waves, and they're very highly randomized. Like if you hear the signal, you don't hear pulses really. You just hear like a noise because it's so highly randomized that they do that because they need to use up more of the bandwidth that they have available. But I guess the logic was that it's going every which way. It isn't always like repetitively pulsed. It's pulsed sort of randomly, even though it is pulsed, let's face it. So we're getting exposed to electromagnetic radiation. Now they had the chart there. Light is electromagnetic radiation. This type of radiation from your phone is non-ionizing. Once you get up to the very high frequencies, you get up into gamma rays. That's what comes off of radioactive material. So if you're up at San Onofre and you get next to the radioactive material, it's putting out gamma rays, which definitely, like if you stand within 10 feet of that, you'll get a lethal dose in 3 minutes. So that's why they have to keep it shielded all the time. It's just like a really bright light you can't see, but it goes through and just decimates your DNA. Now at the lower frequencies, they don't ionize. Now like the gamma rays, they don't directly ruin your DNA. What they cause is other atoms to ionize and split up and shoot the electrons, and that's what hits your DNA and hurts it. These radio frequencies are below that level, and they don't themselves cause any ionization. However, what they're saying here is that just because they don't cause ionization of the atoms and don't directly split up your DNA, there's still effects. I like to use the analogy of trans fats. Trans fats don't cause cancer, but they're still not good to eat. Just because something is not cancer causing doesn't mean it's good for you. And so they always say, it didn't kill you, and so, it doesn't cause cancer, and then it's okay. That's a pretty low bar. So that, I hope, helps a little bit explain that they're experimenting with new frequency ranges that are in this millimeter range, and they don't really have the studies done. In order for those to penetrate your buildings and to get to your cell phone wherever you are, they're going to have more antennas because they're not as good at penetrating things. Right now, we have a lot of electromagnetic radiation going all the time. As you said, everybody's cell phone, if you're in an airplane, that's why they want to put it on airplane mode, just to stop it. And it's good. You go on an airplane, don't you feel better? Here's something that I suggest that you do just for fun. Take some foil. I know it sounds like I'm suggesting a foil hat. And join two pieces and make a little hat for yourself. I'm serious, even though that sounds crazy. But what it does is it gives you a little bit of relief from the electromagnetic waves that are coming in. And then walk around the neighborhood.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
A couple of things. One, when are they planning on rolling out the installation of those 5G?
When are they planning to roll this out? And this is what I find very distressing. They haven't done any studies to see that it's safe. And they're running as fast as possible to put these in. And guess what? Even our Facebook announcement was censored by Facebook because it's against their business model to not have this 5G available. Now, they didn't mention one thing that I think is a very serious issue about 5G, and that is the ability to track where you are in very much detail. It's a security and privacy concern about right now. You know, they can track you within a cell area. Which cell phone tower are you communicating with? And then if you have GPS, there's an app in there that says exactly where you are down to the meter. I know that. But the 5G gets to track you down to wherever you are, just because they're going to have so many antennas, they're going to be focused in on you. And in order to get it to the person, what I understand is they have phased arrays, which mean multiple antennas at the source that are putting out frequencies that work together toward you and wouldn't work, to the side. So it's a beam forming type of thing. I actually worked on those when I was working at the Navy labs out here. So in the Navy, if you have multiple antennas, you can steer a beam towards something and receive it.
What are we looking at in terms of San Diego? Does anyone have any idea what time frame?
It's very hard here in San Diego to go up against this, and I'll tell you why. Qualcomm is a big employer here, and Qualcomm is a maker of 5G equipment. And so if you go to any politician and say, we want you to go up against Irwin Jacobs' family in my district, and in this district right here is a 53rd congressional district, guess who's going to be running? Sarah Jacobs, the granddaughter of Qualcomm. And guess who she's not going to be caring about 5G? She's going to be pushing for it. So it's very, very hard in San Diego to go against this. And for another reason, not mentioned either, I didn't hear this, which was that the FCC has the same kind of federal dominion over this that they have with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Safety in nuclear material is a responsibility of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission only. You can't have a city that says, we don't think that's safe. It's not safe enough for us. They say, no, sorry, it's safe enough for the NRC. You have to accept it. Same happening here now. FCC is now, for some reason, responsible for safety. They don't have a clue about it, probably don't have anybody on staff that knows anything, and yet they're saying it's safe, and the cities can't pass laws against it. They can't even have it on the agenda.